It is a great honor and a privilege to introduce Professor Menachem Steiner. We're here in your beautiful apartment in Jerusalem. And Menachem, you come from a most amazing and incredible family that were involved in the Shoah. So if you could speak to us a little bit about your roots and your family.
Thank you. I was born in the year 1947 in Krasna, a small town in Transylvania in Romania, to my parents Shimon and Rachel of blessed memory, both of them Holocaust survivors. This was the year when Transylvania, a region of Hungary, became part of Romania, so I presume that the Jews in the area underwent the same persecution, including those depicted in the famous Ferencz's film 1945, as the rest of the Hungarian Jewry. What I can recount with certainty, from what I was told later by my parents, that prior to the deportation in 1944, my father was taken to a forced labor camp in Hungary, often tortured, hanged and beaten, and then sent to build railroads in Russia. Prior to the deportation, my grandfather Menachem, after whom I'm named, my paternal grandfather, owned a flour mill and an electric generator plant in Krasna, in the town I was born. He was very well established, highly respected by all, and even served as the head of the Jewish community for some years. In the year 1944, both my parents, who are incidentally first cousins, together with their parents and siblings, large families from Krasna and Margita, neighboring town respectively, were gathered to a brick factory ghetto in Shimleo, Sylvania, and after 5 days of starvation and hardship, they were transported to Auschwitz. 1947 was also the year in which Romania became the Romanian People's Republic under a communist regime. Under this regime, every private business, including my grandfather's flour mill, generator plant, and the whole street of storerooms, was nationalized. Out of hundreds of Jewish people living in Krasna before the Holocaust, only 9 young men, including my father, and a few young ladies returned to Krasna, hoping to find remnants of their families who also survived the horrible inferno. Unfortunately, this wasn't the case. Nobody survived. They all perished in the gas chambers of the Nazis. My father, for example, was the sole survivor from his large family. My mother returned with only 2 other sisters. My father, Olav Shalom, returned to his old home and even found the dishes with the remnants of food from their last family meal before they were taken away to the ghetto. His family was so much respected that the non-Jewish neighbors looked after the house and belongings, so much so they did not clean these dirty dishes in order to keep their kashrut. My mother and her 2 surviving sisters, who also returned, also moved into my father's house. These young returnees were very, very lonely, confused and very anxious to have a family. My parents were the first ones to be married, and later others got married shortly after in my parents' house. I was the first child born in Krasna after the Holocaust and became the child of the whole small Jewish community. Until by my bar mitzvah at age 13, there were only 9 adults in town, one short for a proper minyan of 10 adults. In the absence of visitors, they placed the Chumash in my cradle and later in my hands to make up the missing adult. I vividly remember my bar mitzvah in my home, the day I qualified halachically as an adult, a celebration mixed with cry and joy. It was the first time that a community of hundreds before the Holocaust had a proper minyan again. The small number of families were all religious, prepared everything at home. There was the same menu, I remember, in every household each day, and even the cholent was often confused when picked up from the common oven before Shabbat. My father, Olav Sholem, took upon himself the responsibility of the religious life in the small community. He was the Baal Tefillah, conducting the services. He had no voice, but he was the Baal Tefillah. He blew the shofar, procured an esrog, made sure that the mikveh was functional, arranged the matzah baking, etc., etc. I remember our house always cold in winter. Together with my father, Olav Sholem, we took the heating wood from our home on a sled in the snow to heat the mikveh. Religious life was by no means easy. There was no kosher butcher or anything kosher available. Everything was prepared at home. I remember as a young child taking a chicken in a carton box on my bike to Shimleu, a city 11 kilometers away, to the shochet, the ritual slaughter, and on one occasion, the chicken did not survive the journey. We also made kiddush on homemade challah, as no kosher wine was available. Since we could not afford a private private religious instructor and the cheder, or an elementary school for Torah learning for the children for very long, my father Shalom taught me Torah in my childhood. My father Shalom was employed in a governmental establishment called Aprozar, which bought agricultural produce from the farmers in Krasna and neighboring towns and sent them to the big cities to the army, for hospitals, etc. I remember that often when I went to help my father Shalom, unmarked detectives from the security department made surprise spot checks to check that the accuracy of the weighing scales. If God forbid the scales were out even by a minimal amount, the punishment was so severe, even imprisonment for a few years. The harsh law enforcement by the communist regime affected everybody. My father's wage was minimal, especially for a religious Jew trying to acquire the religious needs of the community. Until this day, I cannot figure out how did he manage to save enough money to procure an esrog for the community at that time. Shabbos and religious holidays were work as usual, and there was school as usual. I remember that when one particular Yom Tov, my father left his place of work to shul, he was taken away from there to a neighboring city, Zalo, by the security department for interrogation and reprimand. It was one of the rare occasions when my mother prepared a festive meal with meat and not chicken, and we conducted the meal with some guests. I still remember who the guests were, without my father Shalom present. It was a very, very unpleasant Yom Tov, which I'll never forget. I think that this result wasn't a direct result of anti-Semitism. I think we did not experience any open anti-Semitism. My family was respected by both Jews and non-Jews. The communist regime demanded respect to all citizens, including Jews. However, it was an anti-religious regime. It did not encourage religious practice, no matter what the religion was. For example, I remember as a schoolboy, that dances or other activities, which were very much liked by the non-Jewish young student population, were all scheduled for Sundays when people attended the churches. I taught every year of my elementary school in Krasna, but wasn't accepted to high school because my parents applied for Aliyah to Israel. However, my mother, who herself was deprived from learning, with a genius head, a genius mind, went to the headquarters of the Communist Party in Bucharest to fight for my admission. She told me that she was ousted from one door and entered through another one with no fear until finally I was accepted to the high school in Shimleo, Sylvania. As I said before, there was school on Shabbos and Yom Tov, so I had to attend. However, I never wrote nor did anything that the Jewish religion prohibits. I always excelled and even won an international mathematics Olympiad. The standard was very high and I enjoyed my school years very much. Despite the poor conditions, I remember a happy childhood. We didn't know anything better, as did the other children, 15 children or so in town. My only sister was born when I was 7 years old. Most people could not afford more than 1 or 2 children. We had no high expectations, everything made us happy. The saddest event that enters my mind was the only funeral of a mother, the wife of the shochet in town, on a miserable rainy Tisha B'Av day. This was the single funeral in Krasna during my years there. My parents applied to Israel many times. On a few occasions they were successful. They sold their belongings, but were declined exit in the last minute, so they returned to start afresh. And for a period of time they lived with non-Jewish people. We finally left Romania in 1963 when I was 16 years old. This was I still kept it. This was our passport. You know, this was our passport with all the visas through all the countries we went through. This is the passport of my father, Olav Sholem, with all the visas in the back. This is the passport of my mother, Alea Sholem, with my sister, Alea Sholem, who passed away a few years ago. Here, this is, and this is my passport. When I was at that age, it's torn, it's old. This is me. Okay. So we finally left, as I said, in 1960, Romania in 1963 when I was 16 years old. I remember we had to pay a huge amount of money to renounce our Romanian citizenship and the ownership of our house. We are not allowed to take out for Romania any monies or coins, not even a photo with writing on the back, except 50 cigarettes. They were the Baragan Romanian brand cigarettes. My Olympiad medal, which I won, which I mentioned before, was left behind hanging in the bedroom of a non-Jewish friend. The story doesn't end. We flew to Rome and a bus was waiting us to take us to Naples to embark on a ship to Israel. My mother and sister already climbed into the bus, and suddenly we heard 2 ladies from the International Highest Immigration Service calling out our family name. We were very surprised. We never left Romania before. We never knew anybody in Rome. The 2 ladies presented us with a letter from my aunt, my mother's sister, who herself left to Israel to Australia, and she described to us the difficult period in Israel during those years, the possibility of me entering university studies, the army, etc., etc. And there was very strict censorship in Romania. She sent us this letter via the highest organization. As the bus had to leave, we literally had minutes to make up our mind what to do. My parents, Aleichem Shalom, had to make a very quick decision. So my father Shalom tossed up a coin which he borrowed from a neighboring to a person nearby. He didn't even have a coin. The outcome of this toss was Australia. So we had to wait in Rome a year to get a visa for Australia. With the help of the hire service, we lived in Rome for approximately 1 year. The 4 of us in one room, on food coupons and bus tickets, and I was selling shoes in Piazza Vittorio in Rome. I even remember selling a pair of shoes. There was the International World Cup match between Italy and Russia, and I sold a pair of shoes to Lev Yashin, the goalkeeper. After approximately 1 year, we left Melbourne, Australia, on the ship Aquila Lauro on its last voyage. It was not a luxurious liner by any means, and the conditions were very miserable. My father Sholem and I shared the cabin with a few Arab men, and my mother and sister with the women. I remember the ship stopped in Port Said for about 6 hours or so, and I even saw President Nasser giving a speech nearby the port. Anyway, as I said, there was no kosher food, nothing. The Arab people sharing the cabin gave us some oranges. I remember the huge oranges, which they gave us and so on. We were practically starving for the whole month because we didn't want to eat non-kosher food. I was very, very, very skinny, when we arrived. After a month-old journey, we finally arrived in Melbourne in January 1964 to start a new life with practically no language skills nor any possessions. With any language skills, my parents worked very hard. My father in a wholesale food distribution business, and my mother was pressing blouses in a factory. Every night she came home with her nose bleeding, I remember distinctly. After a few years subsequently, they opened up the Kinneret Kosher restaurant in Melbourne, and Baruch Hashem, they were successful. Now, so we were in Australia, and I furthered my studies, etc. My father, my mother and sister passed away in the year 1983, 2007, and 2014 respectively, and I brought them to eternal rest in Yerushalayim, to Har HaZeisim. At the age of 17, I completed the last year of my high school in Yeshiva College in Melbourne, entered Monash University, where I received my Doctor of Philosophy in Applied Mathematics in 1973. So it's in about, so let me see, I did it in about 6.5 years. I got my PhD. I was accepted from the master's thesis and so on. And then I joined the academic staff at Monash and then later on Swinburne University. And I served as the chairman of Engineering Mathematics of Group in Australia during 1992 to 1996. In the year 1998, I was bestowed with the inaugural award of the Institution of Engineers Australia for my outstanding contribution to engineering mathematics in Australia. I got married in December 1970 with my wife Dina, and we were blessed with 5 children, one living in Israel and the others abroad. Just 6 months ago, my youngest daughter made Aliyah from Los Angeles. Together with my wife Dina, I made Aliyah to Israel in the year 2002, and I joined the academic staff of the Jerusalem College of Technology, where I served as rector during years 2003 and 2014. I am currently retired, and along my Torah studies and scientific research. I serve voluntarily for various organizations. For example, I'm on the editorial board of the Talmudic Encyclopedia Talmudit. I would like to point out that I visited Krasna together with my wife some 20 years ago, and we saw the flour mill with the name Steiner engraved on the walls. I was even presented by the people there, and I held in my hand the ladle used by my grandfather Menachem to measure the payment for the milling. He was never paid money, cash, for milling. He was given a certain amount of produce, so the metal ladle which he used, I was held in my hand. And also I've seen the whole street full of storerooms converted to clothing factories, some of them from Germany. And I was even, I've seen, so we went to visit the friend where with whom we stayed when we were declined permission to leave Israel, and the friend where my Olympiad was left. So my Olympiad medal mentioned before is still hanging in the bedroom of this elderly non-Jewish friend. He was very, very sick, but he heard that I'm coming, so he even dressed up, and his wife told us, he didn't put on a suit, I don't know, for years, that in my honor, he put on a suit. So this is in short, my life story. I could go on and on.
Menachem, I have to ask you, your friend, he didn't give you back the medal?
I tell you something, he was so attached to it, and he was crying, and I tell you the honest truth, I didn't even ask for it. It was a diploma. It was a diploma, huge diploma, just hanging on the wall there.
And did you manage to go back to the house that you grew up in?
Oh, that's very, very, very interesting that you asked. When we visited Romania, actually what happened is another friends, you may know the Miriam and Leon Shapiro, who made Aliyah from Australia. They live in Rehov HaPisgah. So what happened is that in that year I was invited to a conference in Vienna. I gave a lecture in Vienna, Erev Rosh Hashanah, in the same hall where Mozart gave his first concert, I was told. So we made up with our friends, let's make a visit to Europe and to Israel and so on. So we went. We went to Prague. And we planned to stay during the Yomim Noraim in Prague. So my wife and the Shapiros, we rented the apartment together just across, about 10 meters aerial distance from where the Golan was, in Prague. And I went to give the lecture in Vienna. So the lecture finished at 1 o'clock, I remember, in Vienna, Erev Rosh Hashanah, and quickly ran to the airport. I took a taxi to the airport and flew back to Prague, and they waited for me to pick me up. So I remember, I quickly went. I went to the mikveh, did Hatoras Nadorim, etc., and then we went to daven in the Otnoy Shul, in Prague. It was very, very interesting that two young men were supposed to come to Israel to be the ballet tefillah in the Otnoy Shul for the Yomim Noraim, but for some reason they couldn't come. So what happened is I was the bal tefillah during Rosh Hashanah Yom Kippur that year in the Otnoy Shul. It was an experience I remember, because what happens, the bima is down, mimamakim, and on one side we changed, you see the seats of the Hassam Sofer and the Noida Beyuda, and on one side, and the Maral on the other side. But, that's what it was. Yeah. So I was going to say. So we went also back to Romania. We visited Romania. So I speak Romanian. So my friends were very happy. That I could translate and so on. So we went to various places, and everywhere they told us, since the Jews have left Romania, nothing was doing. You saw buildings started in construction in the middle, but they were not completed. And when I went to my old town, this is where I recognized the lady who came to us to light the fire on Shabbos and so on. Her name was Erzika, I remember. And after about, I don't know, 10, 15 minutes, I was surrounded by all the people, who I remember from Romania still. And there was even one person who was in the same class with me in primary school. Also, I remember there was an old barber, and he lived in the yard of the shul in Krasna. So he was also among the group, and he started speaking in Yiddish. So the Shapiro's mother, who came with us, he said, "Oh, there is another Yid here." So he says in Yiddish, he says, "Yiddish Kayid, I'm not a Jew, but I was living in the Cheder." So, and so it's interesting. The house where I used to live in, we went to see it, and the people, they turned it into some sort of offices. The people opened the door. It was getting dark. It's interesting that without even looking, I switched on the light, in the kitchen. I have a photo of my house on my computer. I don't know if you can video it or something. It's an old.
But Menachem, we'll do that. But Menachem, can I just ask you?
Yes.
Well, definitely, for sure, it will be wonderful. Can I just ask you, your parents, when you were growing up, did they speak to you or relate about the experiences in the Shoah?
Yes, a lot.
While you were growing up?
Yes, definitely. Some people refused to talk to the children about it, but my parents always.
It wasn't a forbidden topic, or you could ask any questions?
What do you mean, forbidden by whom?
In many cases, the parents didn't want to tell the children, they didn't want to burden, or they didn't want to upset the children, so it was a topic not discussed.
My parents were always open about it. I can distinguish, I remember stories distinctly, what they told me and so on. When because of the typhus, they sprayed powder on them, etc., etc. They told me a lot of details. Not only that, my mother, Aleh Shalom, told me in which barrack she was. So years later in Australia, I went to a conference in Krakow. There was even a photo of me with the two deans, two non-Jewish with the mustache, one from the mining university, the other one from the University of Krakow, and me in the middle with a yarmulke. I especially went, and what happened is, my mother Aleh Shalom told me that if I go, to the camps, in which barrack she was, and she even made a sign in one of the barracks and so on. And when I went with a group of in a minibus with a group of people to Auschwitz, I even remember that Professor Beck from Norway came with his wife. And when he came nearby, from the story he heard from his parents, he collapsed, so he didn't come in. But we went into the camps, and I saw the barrack where my mother, Aleh Shalom, was. I even showed her when she was alive, the pictures.
Must have been very emotional. And
yeah, I even brought back some stones, I remember, from the railroad there and so on, But, my parents were always very open about it and told us the whole story. What they went through, it's not only about that, when my father told me that, I don't know whether it was in Russia where he was in forced labor. They were in a pit, 8 people, and something went over them. All of them passed away. Only he was remaining alive. He was the only one surviving. So also my mother told me, how they were starving and so on, and people took away bread from the kids, and one from each other, etc., and they were beaten up and so on. But he also told me that once when they were marching, group of 5, I think she told me, to work, a German officer, with the dog, came close to her, and she was sure she would be beaten up. But this particular person gave her a loaf of bread. She told me many stories, many stories.
And Menachem, can I ask, your mother in particular and your father, did they always remain from? Did they remain?
No question about it.
They never lost their emunah, their faith during the Shoah or afterwards?
Not only that, they lost their emunah. As I told you before, my father kept the Jewish life. If not my father, there wouldn't be a Jewish life, there wouldn't be mikvah, there wouldn't be nothing. He left work, he knew that he would be taken away, but he left work to daven. He was conducting the services, he blew the shofar, etc. Sometimes, as I said before, we were called at home, but there was always a mikveh. I remember the child every Friday afternoon. I went with my father to the mikveh. Never. Always.
Your mother, after
my mother,
having gone through the Gehenna, the hell of Auschwitz, she never lost her faith.
Nothing. No, obviously, a young child. I remember. My father told me the whole thing, everything. We were, there's no question about it, and
that's really to have gone through Auschwitz and to have lost their mishpacha, their family. And
not only, I tell you, I remember this was how many years ago? Maybe about 12 years ago. We were visiting the United States. And I happened to walk, I don't remember the name, what number street in Brooklyn, and I've seen a shul, and I saw the name Bet HaMedrash Krasna. So it was on a Shabbos afternoon, at Mincha time. So I went in, so the Rebbe or the Ruf who was there at the time, I came in, and it's interesting, I resemble very much my father, Ola Sholem. So someone who never, I never met before, he asked me, is your name Steiner? So I said yes. He walked over to the Rebbe, who was in the middle of a drosha or Dvar Torah. He stopped the Dvar Torah, he asked me to sit next to him. And after I was talking to him, what he did, he just praised my father Sholem for what he did to save the Yiddishkeit, in Krasna. If not for him, so the question not to be religious, it's unbelievable, it's unheard of, So I think, if I may say, I think that the Holocaust even. I don't know if you can say, the strength of their belief, because they were, since I know them, they were from before. As I mentioned before, that the non-Jewish people kept the pots, and they didn't wash them even, because they know that we are through. There's no doubt about it. Incidentally, where in that afternoon when I was there in shul, one of the people, I think his name was Waldman, I don't remember exactly his name, he told me, he says, I know how your grandmother, my father Sholem's mother, was killed. I thought he was, actually my father Sholem wasn't alive already then, he passed away in 1983, that I should tell him this fact. he said, your grandmother didn't perish in the gas chamber. She said she was sitting on a bench shortly after arriving to Auschwitz, and a German officer he took a cane and by the neck pulled her, she fell into a pit. So that he told me, this particular Jew told me that my grandmother didn't die in the gas chamber. He died in a pit. She died in a pit.
Wow.
Yeah.
Menachem, and can I ask, your parents, being in Melbourne in Australia after the war,
Yes.
a lot of survivors actually came to Australia after the war.
A lot of survivors. It was,
There was a big community of survivors in Australia.
When we arrived, see, you have to remember, we arrived in we left communist Romania relatively late. It was in 1963, 64.
Yeah.
And by that time, people were sort of established. So I cannot tell who was survivor or who wasn't survivor. I think, and a lot of them came from Russia. So I don't know how many people came from. I know 3 friends of the family who were Holocaust survivors that I remember.
Did your parents, their circle of friends, did that include a lot of survivors when they were in Australia?
Well, first of all, the relatives, my mother's sisters, some sisters also made Aliyah, and their spouses, and so on. So they're all Holocaust survivors, and a few others. There were few, but there were many. I don't remember. I don't know.
And I have to ask you this, Menachem, when the family that sponsored you to come to Australia, they mentioned about that they had moved to Australia. When you came to Australia, how was the interaction when you met the family that had told you that decision not to go to Eretz Israel and rather to come to Australia?
They didn't decide for us. They just described the situation. That the situation tough. I remember she distinctly wrote that I'm telling you. I'm not telling you what to do. I'm just describing the situation. Now, my mother, Aliyah Sholem, was, as I said, she had a brilliant mathematical mind. And as a young child, I knew already quite a bit of arithmetic or mathematics and so on. Unfortunately, and she was a very, very good student. Unfortunately, she couldn't finish her high school because she was taken away and so on. And it was very important for her, and she knew that I have capability. It was very important for her, and I excelled in school. It was very important for her that I should further my studies. So that was a very, very important deciding factor for her. But that wasn't the reason why we came to Australia. As far as from that point of view, she would have. I remember we even cried because we wanted to go to Israel. We had heard about Australia. But, we tossed the coin and so on, and we ended up in Australia. And we came, of course, they received us very nicely. They were not worthy themselves. And I don't know if in Australia at the time you even needed sponsorship or as such. I don't know how formal the sponsorship was. I don't remember. But we came and they received us well. And listen, we in the beginning, we rented an apartment on top of a chemist shop. It wasn't luxurious by any means. And then we went to someone else, in someone else's back house, and so on. It wasn't luxurious. It's,
Were you close with the family, with your family?
Yes, yeah, definitely.
And it must have been...
Not only that, in the end, my aunt, who wrote the letter, together with my parents, they established the Kinneret restaurant together. No, so but of course they were also religious. There's no question about it. My cousin, he in Melbourne, he's a shoichet in the ultra-Orthodox community and so on.
And Menachem, if I had to ask you, what message do you impart to your grandchildren and to the future generations? What message, having gone through your parents surviving, being a child of survivors, what message do you give your grandchildren when they come to you and ask?
Well, first of all, I have two grandsons, which are named after my father-in-law, Sholem. His name is Shimon Olozor. So one is my daughter Judy, Shimon Malik, and you know them, how religious they are and whatever. And another one, my son. We have one son and four daughters. He's the same name. He's got the same name, Shimon Steiner, as my. So first of all, I talk a lot about my father-in-law Sholem, about his character, and anybody who knew my father-in-law Sholem, I don't think I've seen a better or a kinder person than my father Sholem was. I don't want to break down crying, but he had no ego. He was so respected even by Jews, non-Jews, and so on. He never left town. He was always working just for the family, and I remember, my parents, I'm sure they helped us buy houses in Melbourne for me and my sister, and they still didn't have their own house. So I recount to them their kindness and their Mesiras Nefesh for the upkeep of Yiddishkeit, and how with no language skill at all and so on, just with hard work and perseverance, and of course with Hashem's help, how they kept the generation going and so on. And of course my father Sholem, his Torah learning and so on, and my mother's just ingenious skill is just unbelievable. He could have been the sharpest mathematicians, I think in the wow. And and then of course I tell you that despite their survival, how they kept up the tradition and so on, and they're willing to give up everything just to just to keep Yiddishkeit going. Just an interesting story. This reminds me now, where we had the option before we left Romania, that when we were in Rome already, we had the option to fly to Australia, but they said that the flight will arrive, possibility will arrive on Shabbos. So my father said no way. So we struggled on this dilapidated ship or whatever it was for a month, where we could have flown to Australia, but no way, it's. So this is just a very small example that comes to my mind.
It's an incredible example. It's amazing.
Right. Yeah.
So Menachem, I just want to thank you, and that is amazing. Wow, that is something very special. Menachem, I'm so grateful. I just want to really thank you so much. It's been such a honor and a privilege.
Anyhow, it's short, but
No, Menachem, I tell you, I've known you for many years, and I know your daughter and your son-in-law. Yeah. And I was actually at Shimon I think I was at the Bris, and we were at the.
Yes, I remember. Yes.
So we go back many years, but to hear your story, how you relate, and the tremendous honor that you have for your parents, which they so deserve.
This is.
It is such an amazing story, and not only a story, it's such an example for all of us.
Actually, in the Ramoshol in Krakow, yes, so the Shliach Tzibur Siddur, I gave the Siddur there and so on, I even remember davening there at the Omad once and so on, Baruch Hashem.
So it's been
And you know, a lot
wonderful.
of the Svorim here, you know, are from my parents, Alayham Shalom, you know, and yeah.
So you should just have nachas and Admei Vesrim till
Thank you.
120.
It was very short, but it's okay.
It's wonderful, and I'm so grateful to you, Menachem, and that you kept all these documents and your past. It's just wonderful.
See, I have here my.
It's amazing.
This is, you see, in Romania still. Oh, I'll tell you what I have. Maybe I should have shown.
So we can show it now.
These are my parents' ksuba.
Wow, this is your parents' ksuba.
Yeah.
So I'm good. Oh, this is amazing. This is the ksuba.
Yeah, sure. You can see here. See?
So Menachem, if you can just.
Well, let me just see. See, Shabachur, Shimon Elozor, Ben Menachem, and this is my father. Yes. Kalosa Rochel, Par Moisef Yehuda. Shimon Elozor and Yosef Yehuda were brothers. So that's their cousins. My mother was a Steiner from home. You see?
Yeah.
Shimon Elozor, it's my father, Shalom. And Rachel.
And what date were they married?
Oh, 1 minute. 2706 was it 2706. We have to work out, you know. So I think I was born a year after they were married. So I was born in 1947. It must have been 1946.
Wow, this is incredible that you've.
Yeah, I kept it.
Another document.
I even have another document here. 1 minute. Oh, this is the certificate how much schooling I did in Romania. I even have my birth certificate somewhere.
So this is your.
This is a certificate, Ministerul Învățământului, the Minister of no. How do you call of learning? Minister of
Education.
Of education, yes. Școala medie, the middle school, Șimleul Silvaniei. Strada, this is the street where the students. This is.
And it's dated in 1963.
Where is the date? It says in 1963. Yeah, when we left Romania, just before we left Romania, 7th of August. Yeah, I've finished year 10 class. You see X, year 10. I finished school, so this is a certificate that I did year 10 in Romania.
That's amazing. Incredible. Sure, but to have the ketubah, to have kept the ketubah.
Yeah. That's me.
How old were you here? This is when you were.
I don't know, year. I don't know.
And the next one, it's a beautiful.
1 minute, let's go rest.
This is in
Romania.
In Romania.
It is still, I don't know how old I was here. This is the house I was born in, and I lived in Romania and this is number 15. I remember number 15, and when I went to visit, I went through here and to the left and left again. That's where the kitchen was, and I turned on the light myself. Here there was a street going down about 5 minutes away from the school where I was studying. I remember in winter there was ice, and I just slid down, the ice all the way to the school. There's a little stone here in front of the house where I used to sit for hours. We didn't have electronic games or whatever. I was sitting exactly in this position, I remember. And this street here is the whole street. This is the flour mill, which belonged to and the power plant belonged to my grandfather, Lola Sholem. and all the storerooms all along the street that belonged to him. And after the war, just around the corner was the place where my father worked for the government. And here next there was a river. Yeah.
And Menachem, going back must have been very emotional for you.
Sure. Yes, I remember. I remember. So my family traces back to the Toises Yontov, Rabbeinu Yontov Lipman, the Toises Yontov. So my family traces back. So I trace back the family to him, generation to generation. I have it printed out even somewhere. So you ask if we are from. We are from going back long way, and we'll keep going that way. Hashem. Okay, let me see if I can find something. See, actually, to be more precise, the Contras Asveikos, very famous, is the brother of the Toises Yontov, right? Now, so the Contras Asveikos, that's me, and the Contras Asveikos. So our family, this is my parents, Menachem Mendel, after whom I'm named, his mother, and so on, goes back, to the Contras Asveikos. That's him. So, but I'm not in their caliber, unfortunately.
Menachem, in today's standards, you really are.
Halavai. So you took a photo of this?
Yeah.
Okay, let me see what that's doing.
Menachem, this is at your graduation.
This is my graduation. So this is my father Aleh Sholem, my mother Aleh Sholem, my sister Aleh Sholem. This is my wife Dina. When we were freshly married at the time. Actually, we had already one child also. My parents-in-law Aleh Sholem. This is Chazan Michael Naor. He was Chazan in Tiferet Tzvi after Leibel Glanz. And my mother Aleh Sholem, and my graduation in Melbourne. Yes, so that's. We looked much younger at the time. Unfortunately, the only two people who are alive today are these. My sister passed away, very young. Yeah.
This is when you got your PhD?
Yes.
And how old were you when you got your PhD?
I got it in 1973. 1973, and I was born in 47.
And Menachem,
So I spent a year in Italy, and migration and so on. So I did it in record time.
and when you were at university, you never did anything on Shabbos, or
Never.
did you wear a yarmulke?
In Australia university there was no university on Shabbos. There was no university on
Did
Shabbos.
you wear a yarmulke at university?
Always.
Always.
Yeah, sure. Even when I was Krakow at the conference, I was wearing my yarmulke. Sure.
It's such a kiddush.
I can show you some of the books I wrote if you want to. This is.
And here you with Shimon Peretz and with Stanley Fisher.
The mayor near Bakat there. This is one of my PhD students who's I think that's very high up in environment Canada. He did my PhD under me, and so on. And this is the Obment, Dani Hershkovich. And this is the dean of my university in Australia, who presented me for an award for excellence in teaching.
Wow.
Oh, and this certificate here, I flew in for this to Switzerland for 3 hours just to get this. You see, I'm a fellow of the Institute Sefi of the engineering It says the Engineering Society for Engineering Education.
It's very prestigious.
It was sure. There was only 2 awarded in 1 year, and for European people. But I got it as an Australian.
It's amazing, Menachem. Sure. And I think, you know, what's very nice is you have the best boss. Whoever I speak to is at Makon Nev.
What?
They speak so highly of you.
The best boss ever. You see, that's what they wrote there.
It's wonderful, because you were, Menachem, and you are.
Yeah, and here also for the, you see, this is for Mahon Tal. He says, Professor Steiner, you know, they gave me this one when I retired.
That's wonderful.
And this is one of the books I wrote.
The role of, wow, the role of
Mathematics in Modern Engineering. See with my picture here. This was published in Sweden. And another one I have over here. Mathematics in Engineering. It's here. See, this is the Engineering Mathematics Group of Australia. You see? And I was the chairman of this. And see, there was at a conference here. Baruch Hashem.
Baruch Hashem.
This is the, if I can find it here to show it to you. Oh, here. This is the medal I got from the Institution of Engineers Australia, you know, for my contributions. That's
your parents must have been so proud of you.
yeah. And if I can show you just one more thing, let me see, where did I put it? Oh, here. See, there was a ceremony. Here she says Menachem Joseph Steiner. He says Taudat Hokara Metam Aliyah Klita. They picked the 25 people who made Aliyah in the last, I think, 20 years, 1989, 2014, who contributed, you know, to engineering education and mathematics education in
For the state of Israel.
in Israel. Yeah,
That's amazing.
it's one of the.
Kol hakavod, really. Menachem, you are.
When I was young,
You're an example we can all.
when I was young, I was in the soccer club as well. I used to be young once. Okay. Yeah. Baruch Hashem.
Baruch Hashem. Thank you so much, Menachem.
Good. Baruch Hashem.
Menachem, your parents, they made the right decision, because look, you excelled at what you did, and
Baruch Hashem.
and you can in Eretz Israel, and
You see, and I'm the editorial board of this Talmudic encyclopedia. Actually, on the 30th of this month, we are meeting with President Herzog. You know, so this on the 30th.
and Menachem, your role in the Great Synagogue, you still.
I was Gabbai for 20 years. I was on the executive, and I'm still on the council of the thing, but I just now resigned. I did it enough. 20 years of Gabbai.
It's a long time. Well, you made a tremendous impact in every organization and in every field that you served on.
Baruch Hashem. And now, as I said, you know, I was there's a committee for promoting professors in the area of engineering and science. So I'm one of the committee members for the Council of Higher Education of Israel. I was referee of journals and editor of journals, etc.
Menachem, thank you so much, and
Pleasure.
I'm so appreciative.
Pleasure.